to the conversation Bella is going to share with us today. And so, for those of you who have not watched any of our exposure in Operation Gladio and Condor, it is basically operations that were conducted out of NATO post World War II to install fascist dictators all over the world for a big international syndicate to come in and steal all of their resources. What most people don't know, because they're under the impression that the CIA doesn't operate inside the United States, is a lot of the planning activities and the paramilitary training happened in Miami for all of those paramilitaries that were then forward deployed all over the world, not just in Latin America. And so, Bella, I'm going to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself and tell us, both with Citizens Defending Freedom and all of the organizations that you've been working inside of for the last several years, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me, Colonel. I got so much respect for you. Every single one of your posts, you're just such a wealth of knowledge and such an asset to the community, about everything that you share with us. And, when I read your content, kind of over the years, what's always resonated with me is that here you are, explaining from bird's eye view, this historical perspective of this is how the agencies have been weaponized against you. This is how it is that they work with PR agencies or the press or whatever it may be. And as I'm watching you talk about these historical facts, I'm connecting it to real life experiences that I'm having and that other people in my community are having as a result of being involved, of being activists, of fighting, whatever brand you want to put on it, right? So my name's Isabella. I live in Miami-Dade. I am a first-generation American. My parents were Cubans that fled communist Cuba. My grandparents were very involved in rebel fighting efforts against the communist regime in Cuba. My grandmother was a political prisoner for almost 9 years as a result of it, which is what forced them to flee Cuba in order to come to the U.S. And what can I tell you? Over the last couple of years, like so many of us, it became excruciatingly obvious to me that what was happening around us was something that I could be an active participant in, whether that meant posting online, which is how I started on an anonymous page. Nobody knew who I was. And I just started posting and growing that account. And then after the 2020 elections, it became very obvious to me, after experiencing what I think was a collective trauma as an American of watching what we did that night of November, going to sleep and having Donald Trump have the lead and waking up the next day and watching what they had done to us. It became very obvious to me that at least my calling was I had to get off the internet and I had to get on the ground and I had to get involved. And sure enough, since 2021, I've been involved with several organizations, but one of the ones that I'm most proud to be a part of is right now Citizens Defending Freedom. I am the executive director for the Miami-Dade chapter of Citizens Defending Freedom that empowers regular citizens with the resources that they need to become involved in the civic process. And we do that by providing legal resources, research and intelligence resources to just regular Americans to go out there and fight things that don't make a whole lot of sense, following the money locally, commissioners, school board meetings, so on and so forth. As a result of our work, one of the first endeavors I would say that we collectively had, I used my platform to go ahead and mobilize my followers, let them know, hey, guys, I know that you've been following me for news for a very long time, but I need you guys in this fight. And sure enough, we were able to mobilize a lot of people in our community. I'm talking about, there was a time when we had over 160 volunteers. And one of the first things that we decided to go after, and this is kind of what's going to set the stage for the conversation that we're going to have. One of the first issues that we decided to tackle as a community, when we were finally able to kind of like organize and realize that collectively we could make a difference, was the school board. And Miami-Dade is no secret. I don't think anybody thinks of Miami-Dade as a conservative stronghold. Everyone might be thinking of the Bible Belt or something like that. But I think when people think of Miami, they think of, the Scarface movies and clubs that are open all night and drugs and maybe things that they wouldn't consider conservative. And sure enough, our school board was representative of that. They would recognize every LGBT effort several times a year. They were out there trying to push CRT. There had even been conversations about mandated vaccines. A year into the pandemic, kids were still masked up. And we were able to organize and really push back against that. And the end result, this was 2021, we're now in 2024. The end result of that fight, and why I so strongly believe in local action and the impact that it has, is that we were able to flip the Miami-Dade County School Board into the largest conservative body in the country. Miami-Dade has the most conservative school board in the entire country, and it's not a result of just who lives in Miami. It's a direct result of people becoming involved, of what happens when you have a community of people that want to become involved. We've had many wins. Miami-Dade no longer spends, several months celebrating LGBTQ history. There is no CRT here. We'll never have to worry. As long as we maintain our conservative majority, we don't have to worry about mandated vaccines. We've been able to enact prayer day. All of our school board meetings start with prayer now. We were the first county in all of Florida to start a chaplain program in the schools. So we've put the CDF has helped in several school districts put flags in every school. We've been able to make a significant difference and really show what the end result of being involved is. And we've been victorious. We've won. And I like to use that, and I like to say that because I genuinely believe that if we can do that here in Miami, in the land of the Tony Montanas and all of this stuff that's just completely degenerate, if we can do that here in Miami, it can really be done anywhere in the country. Now, here's where it kind of like opens up to the stuff that you talk about, Colonel, which completely blows me away. As a result of having that success, as a result of becoming involved, something that had never happened in the history of Miami-Dade before, as a side effect, if you will, of being that involved, we became targets. And we became the targets of a very powerful public relations firm by the name of Balsera Communications, owned by a gentleman by the name of Freddie Balsera, who was the Hispanic media advisor to Barack Obama, spent years in the White House with Barack Obama and Joe Biden, is mentioned in the WikiLeaks email, helped Hillary Clinton with her campaign. In fact, Freddie Balsera was very much in the front lines next to the David Brocks of the world, fighting the WikiLeaks, the stuff that had come out of WikiLeaks. So whether you're talking about Pizzagate, Hillary's emails, Podesta, they were very much at the forefront of countering that information. So much so that Freddie Balsera sat on the board of a super PAC called Correct the Record with David Brock from Media Matters. And the PAC's purpose was to challenge quote unquote misinformation, which, as you all know and have experienced, when they say that they're challenging misinformation, really all that means is that they're challenging us, challenging their lies. So sure enough, we became a target because Freddie Balsera's firm also represents the local teachers union, who was our biggest opposition. And when Colonel recently had posted about how it is that the CIA has weaponized PR agencies, how it is that, when we got to talking, I started talking to her about how the union has been able to mobilize foot soldiers, if you will, in order to go out there and fight against this organic opposition that has occurred as a result of what we experienced in 2020. And completely fascinating to me, all of the stuff that Colonel was talking about as far as like operations go that happened during the times of my grandparents. It's like, wait a minute, this sounds exactly like what we experienced in Miami-Dade. So that's kind of to set the stage for what we've experienced, and hopefully what we're going to be able to dive into a little deeper now.
So, and to catch everybody else up again, for those of you who will be tuning in from Bella's audience that's not familiar with this, I want to put out a couple of talking points, and then Bella is going to fill in the meat, and basically the floor is going to be hers. So first of all, she mentioned the discovery that I recently made about labor unions and how they are integrated into the CIA's regime change operations and just basically CIA activity all over the world. So the labor unions, particularly AFL-CIO, had set up an international institute in Washington, D.C. And out of that institute, they used union members' money, but primarily money from the National Endowment for Democracy, which was set up as a CIA front, to fund our government tax dollars into this quote unquote International Union Institute in DC. And they would use that money to go to Venezuela, Chile, Nicaragua, Guatemala, everywhere throughout Latin America. Now, we have found them over in Angola and some African countries as well, but their primary focus initially was in Latin America, all over the Caribbean, Central America, South America. And what they did was, like in Venezuela, they basically became jackboots. They used money to go down and create basically what I would refer to in common language as a front union. It wasn't a real union. It was a union to defeat unions. So in Chile's case or Venezuela's case, the primary employers in those countries at the time in Venezuela was an oil consortium that was led by Standard Oil. In Chile, it was a mining consortium that was led by Freeport Mines, both of which were U.S. corporations. And the people there were being paid like 87 cents a day. And so they wanted to unionize and create a real union. So what the International Union in Washington, D.C., affiliate with the AFL-CIO did was they sent quote unquote union organizers down that were actually CIA agents to disrupt their forming a union and co-opt them, just like they did on January 6th, where they infiltrate and make the entire thing bad when the actual thing is good. So I just want you to keep that in your mind. That's how they basically took credible union activity throughout the world, hijacked it, and they hijacked it because the international corporations that were based in the United States took their workforce or their money and investments. They didn't want to mine in America because they'd have to pay real union wages. They wanted, and we have all of these resources here, by the way. They wanted to mine in Latin America where they could find someone and pay them 87 cents and thwart any effort they ever made to unionize. And that was all being done. And we were being told here in America, well, we can't let them have that union because they're communist. The people that are trying to unionize down there are communists, so it can't be that union. And so that went on for decades and decades. Now, Bella also mentioned PR firms. You guys that have been with us know all about the CIA's use of PR firms. I was explaining to her PR firms like Hill and Knowlton in Washington, D.C. has been literally a parking place for CIA agents that can no longer be on the books of the CIA, and they have to hide them out for a little bit. Not that they're not still going to be operating, but they're going to be hidden in these PR firms because PR firms work internationally and they use that as a guise to travel around the world. So PR firms are critical to the CIA doing regime changes and crafting messages after they co-opt local media. That's number two. Number three is the ambassador force that are in these countries oftentimes come from the CIA world. And you say, oh, well, there's a lot of ambassadors that are not CIA agents. Yes, there are. But if you look deep inside their ambassadorship, what you're going to find is a lot of them just happen to appear to be, and it's always the same ones, by the way, they happen to be ambassadors in locations that are undergoing a coup. So if the guy that was in Brazil during their coup ends up in Chile while they're going through their coup, and he also ends up in Venezuela when he's going through their coup, I'm going to go ahead and tell you they're not really an ambassador. So that kind of sets the stage for how the CIA infiltrates movements internationally, and anyone who thinks they don't do that here is crazy. Go ahead, Bella.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things where, I want to say I don't have a military background. I'm a regular person with an HR background that just wanted to get involved and in the fight for preserving the republic. And for a very long time, the idea, since you just mentioned, if you think they're not doing it here, for a very long time, very humbly so, I thought there's no reason for me to be a target. Like, I try to be a very pragmatic thinker. I try not to be overly paranoid of, the idea of thinking of like spies infiltrating you or, operators or provocateurs. The idea of that was always something that was disconnected from me because I just saw myself as a regular nobody. I don't really have any experience. But one of the biggest realizations that I've had for over the last few years is that these individuals or these entities will target groups when they're in their infancy stages. All they have to see is the potential. If they see that there is a leader amongst you or a fraction of a group that's coming together to organize that could potentially have some kind of repercussion for the established, narrative that they've put together, the order that they've put together, they don't wait until you're a big known voice to attack you. It makes a lot more sense to come after you and your efforts when you're still small. And I say that because, in my head, I thought, well, I'm not relevant enough to be targeted. But I was. I've had provocateurs that have befriended me. I've had them in my home that I've invited them in under thinking that they were good people, that were my friends, that were involved in this fight with me, and that ended up being operatives very much working against our interests. And I mean, this is stuff that you guys will read about all the time, maybe see in movies. I lived it. You'll have people come into your groups with the intention of quote unquote helping, and they're only there to waste your time. Oh, let me get that form. I'm going to fill it in for you. And then you follow in 2 weeks later and it's like, hey, what happened to the form? I was going to do it, but then I forgot and I'll do it tomorrow. And then another week goes by. And then before you know it, they've killed the momentum on something that you're working in. I've seen them try and affect interpersonal relationships where they'll come into our groups and they'll try and like turn people against each other. Hey, do you know Colonel Bella has said some really awful things about you. Are you sure you want to be friends with her? Things that never happen, but just as a way of planting the seed, seeding doubt, creating animosity within a group of people that's working very well together. And it wasn't until I was at the other end of being a target when they had actually kind of like set off a bomb, if you will, into our efforts that I was really hit with the reality that I wasn't too small and that the efforts that we were doing were a significant threat to the established order that they had had for a very long time.
Yeah, and that's perfect. To me, you hit on two very important things. Target the leaders. If you show potential, they will cut you off at the knees early, and creating agitation in a movement, which goes in line with what we refer to as strategy of tension. You can derail efforts as long as you can pit people against each other. You kill the momentum, as you said. That's such astounding, and it's also, Bella, I think, amazing for you to be a real life example of everything that we've been studying, because I remember you way back during the elections, even in 2022. You were very outspoken. I know that you had the ear of a lot of the people in the state of Florida, and that had to threaten a lot of people. But good on you, number one, for stepping out and being that role model, but number two, being effective enough for them to target. And I know that sounds totally weird, but that means that you are making a difference.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I think I like to use that as kind of, when I talk about the wins that we've had here in Miami-Dade as a result of just becoming involved and, thinking about it, the civic responsibility that we all have, I think that we've been almost like dociled into thinking that it's an option, that being involved in the civic process is like, oh, there's activists and then there's people that are not activists. And the reality is that involvement should be something that we're all as Americans see as a responsibility we need to be involved in. So whether it's attending a school board meeting once a month or a commission meeting once a month, or, that helping out a grassroots candidate lead their campaign, knocking on doors, whatever it may be, I do believe that everybody, every American should take some degree of pride in the fact that our country awards us the opportunity to be involved in that process and not fall asleep at the wheel. Something that most people don't know as far as statistics go, more than 60% of all open elections in our country are won completely unopposed. That means nobody runs against the bad guy. The bad guy doesn't have to steal an election. The bad guy steps in because nobody else runs. Nobody else runs. There's nobody there to contest it. And very often, the reason why people don't run is because the good people that do very quickly get made a target by these PR firms, opposition, so on and so forth, that don't want the established order to be shaken up in any capacity.
So let's dig in a little bit about your experience with the union.
Yeah, absolutely. So, let me start off by talking about the school board efforts when we started, right? So
Sure.
The first meeting that we had, it was a year into the pandemic and kids were still masked up. And, as a community, we had kind of all agreed, well, we're all here together. We all know that we want to do something. What's the first thing that we're going to tackle? And everybody just unanimously agreed, the kids. Like, we need to protect the children. Kids are masked up. They're falling behind in school. We're watching them being sent home with lessons that we don't approve of. And we really don't have anywhere to go. And that was kind of like the first realization that I had that really took me back, which is that the average American didn't even know where to go to complain. So it's like, who do we go? The schools are masked up in schools. Do we go to the mayor? Do we go to the governor? Do we go to the superintendent? Do we go to the Department of Education? Do we go to the CDC? Like, even just figuring out who to complain to was an issue, right? Well, sure enough, we show up to our first school board meeting. I want to say that we were able to mobilize over 100 people to speak out against masks at this meeting. And one of the school board vets at that time that we actually forced into retirement, she had been sitting on the school board for 27 years. She stopped the meeting halfway through it through public commentary, and she tells us, in my 27 years of experience here, 26 at the time when she made the statement, in my 26 years of sitting in the seat, I have never seen anything remotely close to this degree of community participation. So it was something that really shook them up. So sure enough, we show up to our first meeting, completely blow them out. They had no idea that we could even organize like that. And we show up to our second meeting, and it was just as successful, and it was fantastic. And then we show up to our third meeting. And when we showed up to our third meeting, I can't describe it as anything other than a circus. They had trucks with, calling people fascists, and, these advertisement trucks. And they had people dressed as clowns, and people in stilts, and people with signs. And it was this degree of organization, like opposing the parents that were there. And it didn't seem organic, because here we had been for the last two months showing up to these meetings. And that's when we start piecing together this show that had been orchestrated to oppose us. I mean, I'm talking about clowns, people in stilts, trucks, music, that they have mobilized dozens of people. It was all being coordinated by the teachers union and their PR firm. Now, you guys got to understand a little bit of history too. We've all got local teachers unions. All of them, for the most part, are more focused on politics than they are on your child's education. However, one of the things that makes Miami-Dade very unique is we're the third largest school board body. We're the third largest school district in the entire country. The union, as far as it goes, is the single most influential teachers union in the entire country. This is as a result of not just the size of our district, But as a result, that the president of the United Teachers of Dade, which is the teachers union here in Miami-Dade, the president of that union is also the vice president of the American Federation of Teachers. She is quite literally Randy Weingarten's right-hand person. In fact, when Joe Biden was inaugurated on January 20th, 2 weeks after his inauguration, he had the teachers union in his office. And part of the people who were in his office were Randy Weingarten and Carla Hernandez-Matz, the president of the United Teachers of Dade. Carla Hernandez-Matz in 2022, like you mentioned when you're bringing up my involvement in 2022, was that I was working very closely with the governor's office during his run in 2022, because Carla Hernandez-Matz wasn't just the president of the United Teachers of Dade, she was also running with Charlie Crist as his lieutenant governor in the 2022 governor elections of Florida against Ron DeSantis. So I give you guys that brief to understand that at this point, we're not just opposing the leftist ideology in the school boards. Now it became, we're opposing the best interest, the better interest of the unions who benefit off kids being masked up, LGBT, teaching LGBT and CRT and all of these other things, getting rid of vouchers and all of these things that the union pushes for. They had all of a sudden received opposition for the first time ever. And it wasn't just that the union was on the line. It wasn't just that their ideology was on the line. They also had a political campaign that was on the line. And they also had to be, if we defeated it here in Dade, them being the most influential teachers union, then it was kind of sending a message to the rest of the country that the union could be defeated. Now, one of the things that I want to say is that as a result of this, a very public, fight, I would say, with the unions that was occurring here in Dade was a huge testimony for the rest of Florida, but it's really happening all over the state and all over the country, was that Ron DeSantis passed legislation that made it so that unions could no longer make an automatic withdrawal from your paycheck at the moment that you became a government employee for the school district, which is how it used to be. Now you actually have to sign up for union dues, and you have to agree that you want to be a part of the union, as opposed to before, where it was just assumed that you were going to be a part of the union. They'd start withdrawing, and then you'd have to go out of your way to drop yourself as a member from the union. As a result of that, union memberships all over Florida have actually dropped under 60%. And what that represents for the union is that somebody can show up and oppose them, an opposing union, an opposing group that wants to be a resource. They're no longer protected or funded by the state, which is part of what we've accomplished. But the unions, as a result of making the unions our enemies, what the union down here did is, logically, the president of the teachers union can't show face and oppose parents at a school board meeting. But what they would do was that they would mobilize individuals, the PR firm of the union would mobilize individuals from other unions. So I think I had mentioned this to you last week. Here in Miami-Dade in particular, Balsera Communications didn't just represent the teachers union, they also represented a group of baristas, coffee makers, that wanted to be unionized. And when we started at these school board meetings, what started happening is that we were meeting through what most people consider Antifa, right? The alternative kids are all dressed in black, and they've got their umbrellas, and they've got their flags, and they've got their things. We started identifying these people showing up to the meeting. There wasn't a lot of them, but it seemed to be that the connection was most of them were baristas involved in some degree in the fight against unionizing for coffee. Now, I don't know if to go on from there, because the next point that I want to make, and I don't know if you kind of want to set it up, Colonel, but one of the things that has been made very obvious to me is very often we'll hear people say something like, George Soros funds Antifa, but nobody really knows what that looks like. Nobody knows, right? Are they cash apping these kids? Are they selling them money? What does that actually look like when we say something like George Soros is funding Antifa? Well, what it actually looks like is it's these PR firms. These PR firms are the ones that are paid for by the NGOs, by the special interest groups to protect their better interests. An example of that is, a couple of years ago, and I'm not sure how many of you are aware, but a couple of years ago, it broke in the news that George Soros had spent millions of dollars buying out Spanish-speaking AM radio stations, and that he had donated all of this money to buy up all of these radio stations. There's one radio station in particular that has been around since the ages of my grandmother that can still be heard off the coast of Cuba today, which is called Radio Mambi. And that radio station has been around for a very long time. And during the 2016 and the 2020 elections, they received a lot of opposition because they were blamed for spreading quote unquote misinformation and radicalizing the Cuban American vote in Miami-Dade that overwhelmingly shows up in support of Republicans and Donald Trump. That radio station, along with many others all across the country, were targeted by this investment of George Soros. Radio Mambi, along with a couple of the other radio stations, were bought out not directly by Soros, but by an organization called Latin Media Network. Latin Media Network received their funding from George Soros. Latin Media Network is also a client of Balsera Communications. You guys cannot begin to understand, and this is something that's so important while we're on this platform. Antifa, what you guys think Antifa looks like, the umbrellas, the people dressed in black, all of that, those are the optics they want you to think of Antifa. When you think of Antifa, they want you to think of those optics. They want you to think of the little nerds that live in their mom's basement, dressed in black, little anarchists. The reality is that is not Antifa. Antifa is the press. Antifa is the public relations firms. All you have to look around is the persecution that patriots that were in Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021 have received as a result of being on this application. Find the Antifa pages doxing individuals. Look at Sedition Hunters. Look at where Sedition Hunters is getting their information from. Do you guys know that over 70% of all people that have been charged for January 6 were identified not by the FBI, but by tipsters? More than 70% were identified by tipsters. What that tells me is that they're not persecuting people based off the severity of whatever crime is alleged that they participated in during January 6th. They're persecuting people based off whoever Antifa puts a target on their back. So one of the things that I hope that kind of like opens everybody's mind that listens to this is that the way that they fight us, these operations that they launch against us to oppose us, they want you to optically think of the kids dressed in black breaking windows. Antifa is much bigger than that. Antifa is very much a very well organized machine of journalists and PR agencies that control the narrative, and as a result of also having clients in union spaces, are able to weaponize and mobilize foot soldiers for their causes and their narratives. I'm sorry, I don't know if I went off a bit on the tangent here, but
no, you are doing perfect. And I want to point out that you are making such excellent points on how the operation goes on. So now I want to correlate what she just told you about the radio stations. You remember when they were invading Guatemala and Nicaragua and Honduras and all of those, the radio station on Swan Island, and how that was critical to the operation. Those are exactly the tactics of the CIA when they go in to overthrow governments. She is describing to you the whole operation, and it has been turned on the United States of America, on our own citizens. What did she just tell you about how that they were identifying people to pick up? She just identified to you the Phoenix program used in Vietnam on how they went about identifying the people that they were going to pick up. They use these quote unquote tipsters in order to target people. And there, of course, they murdered them. Well, of course, we have had people that are part of the January 6th that once they were targeted, they committed suicide. She's describing to you the Phoenix program being used on the inside of the United States. So, Bella, you're doing an excellent job. Keep going.
I'm the fact that you mentioned that, about the unaliving themselves. I want to be careful, like as far as terminology on the spaces, but the all I can go based off is this real life example that I have of what I have experienced. I go back to you guys. I don't have a military background. I don't have any kind of expertise about any of these things. I'm a normal person whose favorite movies involved 50 First Dates and like other dumb things. This was never my thing. And all I can speak on is the very real life experiences that we've had here in Miami-Dade as a result of becoming involved. One of the things that I've been able to track over the last 3 years is that these people want you dead. I cannot stress that part enough. They will go out of their way to create mental anguish for people. In fact, there's a particular Antifa page here that has on this app that has been harassing and identifying and doxing and turning people into the FBI or whatnot, specifically powered by, funded by the teachers union, by the PR firm of the teachers union, as a result of the opposition. And one of the things that they consistently post about is the idea of having people unalive themselves is something that they celebrate, because there has been people that have taken their lives as a result of it, and they've celebrated this. And they'll say things like, yes, you'll never know peace. You'll never know peace. You'll never know when we're watching. You'll never know when we'll be behind you. I mean, it's gotten to the point, guys, where I could go to the grocery store, and if just so happens that one of them could be around, I don't know that, they'll take pictures of me and follow us around. And it's not just myself. We're talking about dozens of community and of individuals in the community that their true intention is to create so much. I'm trying to find the right word for it. They want to create mental anguish for you. Oh, you want to be involved in the civic process? Oh, you want to play politics? We're going to make it unbearable for you. We're going to dox your family. We're going to come after your jobs. We're going to come after your friends. We're going to ridicule you. We're going to stalk you. We're going to harass you. We're going to come after your livelihood. Whatever it is that they're going to do, they want to make it so unbearable that you say, to hell with it. I can't do this anymore. I don't want to be involved in it anymore. I've lost too much. Like, very much has happened here in Miami-Dade. I have lost dozens of activists that were very much involved. They have had to take a step back because they're like, I have kids in the school system. I can't be made a target of that and make them a target. Or I'm a single mom with a job and I can't afford to lose my job because this Antifa page is talking about me. So unfortunately, I can't go back to another school board meeting. The intention is very much to create an environment around your activism that makes it seem like I don't want to do this anymore. And you don't even have to take my real life example for it. Look at some of the things that you see happen online. Look at these attacks that you see. And I don't even want to point to one side or another. It's irrelevant, but there seems to be a group of people within our community here in this digital space that, make no mistake, is still very much part of the same operation, that seem obsessed with, if you don't think that the guy that I think is bad, then you too are an operative, and I'm going to dox your job, and I'm going to ridicule you, and I'm going to make memes about you. The goal is to make it so unbelievably unbearable or unsafe that the people that are willing to fight are forced out. And I think that that's a pattern that can be recognized even if you're not locally involved. I think that you can watch what's going on around us, even on the digital space, and realize, wait a minute, these are Antifa-like intimidation tactics. You know what else Antifa loves to do? Discredit people by third-party connections. Oh, well, you took a picture with that one bad person one time, and they've got a history of I don't know what, so you must also be bad. The trying to discredit people by association. Once again, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. So once you see it, you cannot unsee it. This is something that's happening on the digital sphere right now, on this information war that we are a part of. There are people within our own community and on Community 2 for Community, whatever it is that you want to call it, that seem to be that seems to have the strategy of, I support Trump, I love Donald Trump, we love Donald Trump, but also I'm going to dox you and I'm going to come after you and I'm going to discredit you and I'm going to say that you're a bad person by association if you don't agree with XYZ narrative that I have. And, I feel that when we talk about all assets being deployed, I think that that's what it looks like. I think that what we're living right now, what I've seen, and I should point out that I think that part of the ability that I've had that maybe puts me in a very particular position that maybe others are not in, is that because of the large exposure that I had. I mean, my platform right now is very small to what it was before I was targeted by these PR agencies, and as a result, deplatformed everywhere. So I don't necessarily have a huge presence online right now, but I did for a long time. And I think that my very unique perspective is that I went from being at the forefront of that digital fight to also doing something that a lot of people haven't done, which is to be a leader within these activist circles. And what I've seen is that I was able to identify the patterns as I saw operatives online doing the same thing that the operatives on the ground were doing. And I think that that's a very unique perspective that I like to share, because I don't think everyone has it.
I could not agree with you more, because what you did in the joining the activists online and going through the visualization of all of the exposure, if you will. So, one of the things that I noticed about you and most of the people that you interact with online, who we're in community talking spaces, Bella and I are, and I noticed that she's very astute at offering um, and I'm talking about back when we were on True Social, which is where I first discovered her. So she makes, and that's what caught my eye. She makes very astute observations. She can immediately recognize things, and she was doing that in the digital space. That talent of hers, when she decided to take it kinetically and actually get involved in her own backyard, which of course General Flynn encourages everybody to do, she took those skills of being able to spot trends and people and patterns, which Bridget and I talk about all the time, recognizing patterns. And she used that in real life to transition that into actually a shield for herself, because had she not been able to put two and two together and be able to understand what was happening around her in the space that she was operating in, she may have not turned out as effective, because they would have been able to neutralize her. And so she had developed some skills. I want to go back to something that you talked about here, this organization called Latino Media Network. I want to make a couple of observations. Um, she was talking about this being part of this because they also are a coordinator, a PR for firm for Latin America media entities. Now, as Bella said, the majority of Latin America, especially in the Cuban environment in Miami, are very conservative. They are not liberals. And what I find interesting is you start going down, which we always do, through the page of who's on their board, you don't find any of the conservatives there. And what's interesting to me is they have this one woman here. Her name is Alicia Bassuk, Bassuk. And if you start looking down her page, basically what she does is go into environments and from a PR perspective, but who she affiliates with, she's funded by McKinsey, that consulting firm where we got Pete Buttigieg. She's also funded by the Rockefeller Foundation, the NAACP. And so you see that many of the, and the UN too, by the way.
That Buttigieg connection is actually really interesting, because Balsera Communication also did work for Pete Buttigieg's campaign in 2020.
Correct. And he came from McKinsey. He was employed by McKinsey at the time he was running. And so this woman has done a lot of work for them. And so one of the telling signs, and these are skills, Bella, and you're helping me help other people by telling your story, which is why I was so happy that you decided to come in here. Because what we're explaining to you guys is how you find these people. Bella is telling you firsthand things that made her antenna And that's exactly what I got when she told me her story. I'm like, oh my God, you've got to tell my audience, because this is exactly what we've been trying to prepare people for in teaching them discernment and skills on how to research people. So it took me, 5 seconds while she continued to talk. But let me bring one other guy up. Al, and you can help me say his last name properly. Cardenas. Cardenas. I'm not sure how you say that last name. Do you know Bella? Bella?
I'm so sorry. I didn't realize I was on mute. Now, I'm not familiar with Al Cardenas. Now, what organization is he with?
He's with that Latino Media Network.
Media Network. Okay.
So he was recognized as one of the top DC lobbyists. And he's a senior partner in the Coral Gables Trust Company, which is how they money launder, by the way. I'm not accusing him as money laundering, but that is how they do it with those trusts. But the most important thing to me is he is himself a card-carrying union member, the American Conservative Union. But do you know what else he did? He was part of the Republican Institute International Advisory Board.
Wow.
Well, let me tell you something. The IRI was set up in the bill that created the National Endowment for Democracy. And for everybody that's on here, because we have new listeners, the National Endowment for Democracy is a CIA front company. It was set up as a way to offshore CIA work into a nonprofit to get CIA out of the crosshairs. And it was done during a period when the CIA was getting exposed for doing regime change, money laundering, drug operations, and all that other stuff. So they decided that they were going to take a bunch of their work and put it into the National Endowment for Democracy, the IRI, and another organization that was set up at the same time for Democrats. What the IRI is, it was a slush fund for the Republicans and a similar slush fund for the Democrats to do their own regime change. The IRI, for the first 25 years in its existence, was the CEO of it was John McCain. So while John McCain is a senator sitting on the Intelligence Committee, he is operating a fund that allows, and you can look him up on the internet in any venue, IRI, the International Republican Institute. They were used to regime change in foreign countries. So you hit a real hotbed of very interesting people.
I think that one of the reasons, I think that kind of what has occurred is that, logically, they're going to target all the different demographics, right? And I think that particularly, I've had a vision for it. I saw the vision. I knew that it was inevitable. Latinos showed up to support Donald Trump and the Republican Party overwhelmingly in these last elections. And I'll in full transparency, I believe that there's still a lot more ground to gain. In fact, I feel that if there's any demographic that the Republican Party benefits in going after, it is the Latino vote, because they just culturally, we are conservative by nature.
Correct.
It's just we're very pro family. We're very pro. We're we're very masculine men, very feminine women, and we believe in gender. So it's very logical that Latinos would have been where to pull support from, right? And I think that I believe that the Democrats, or whatever it is how you want to explain it, had identified that Latino people were a problem. And all that to say the following: I think that another unique perspective that I have is that while this happens at a very large scale all over the country, Miami being a true beacon for all of South America here in the United States, this is where people come. It's not, Mexicans go to California, but if you're in business in South America, you come to Miami-Dade, whether that's Colombia, Venezuela, Panama, Ecuador, Salvador, you come to Miami-Dade to make that happen. So here I am, I just so happen to share, an area code with the most influential Hispanic PR firm in the entire country. It's inarguable. BelleLiberTea Communications has been involved with some of the biggest Democratic campaigns, some of the biggest efforts that oppose the kind of work that we do, for lack of having a better word than to call it work. BelleLiberTea Communications is representative of one of the largest, most powerful public relations firm in that space, which gives me a unique perspective, because I might as well be in DC at this point. You understand? Like, I'm in the hotbed of where this corruption is having at it. You know, when we talk about local action, I want to take an opportunity to say this too, Colonel, because I think it's so important. And I think that sometimes even I miss the opportunity to emphasize this. Local involvement does look like going to school board meetings and going to commission meetings and showing up to community events and helping local candidates. But I also understand that that's not feasible for everybody. However, you know what very much is? Local digs. Following the money in your local community. Different candidates when they're running, who's been in power for a long time, who supports them, who runs their PR, who's donating money to them, who's funding their campaigns. And I think that in all of our communities, it doesn't matter how small your community is. A lot of you come from places that maybe, you know, it's a famous family that's been around and it's been in power for such a long time. I think that there is a lack of hyper focus on the quote unquote exposing of corruption from a local perspective. And again, forget the activism, boots on the ground work of it. This is still very much important. You know, think about the collective of our truther community, right? When we go out there and we start researching a particular one of Trump's picks, let's say, you know, Trump picked somebody for the cabinet, and immediately we go out there and we start finding videos and we start finding money and we start finding out like what can potentially make this person not qualified for that particular position. I think that there's a certain passionate and like organic curiosity to go out there and expose this that would be significantly more beneficial for our country as a whole in taking it back if that same kind of hyper focus and passion was there, and curiosity for discovering the corruption in our own backyards, in our own community. Because really what I've stumbled across here in Miami-Dade has always been there. It's just a result of my personal interest and invested in the fact that I need my community to be in a better place. You know, I'll get off the soapbox in just a bit, but I want to make one more comment about the importance of local government, which is that, you know, I live in the free state of Florida, and during COVID, there so many people would have wished that they lived in Florida, you know, in order to be able to, oh, you guys are so free, and you know, you don't get this and you don't get that. The power of local government became very obvious to me as a result that despite me living in the free state of Florida during COVID, there were people in Miami-Dade that got fined and arrested for going to the beach. We were fined for breathing fresh air. We were kicked out of parks. A year into the pandemic, our school board still had the children of Miami-Dade masked up. Our mayor had shut down cruise ships, requiring a vaccine mandate that, thank God, Governor DeSantis ended up pushing back against. The magnitude of that cannot be explained. Close to 90% of the world's entire cruise industry operates out of Miami-Dade. If our mayor, not a governor, not a president, not a senator, if our mayor says you're going to need a vaccine passport in Miami-Dade to get on a cruise, she just affected 90% of the world's cruise industry. So that became a very big, obvious moment that shook me up and awakened me to the fact that it's like, I don't have a lot of control in Washington, but nobody's watching these guys in my own backyard. It's guys that are...
Did we lose you?
Yeah, sorry, I had a phone call come in.
Okay.
On airplane.
Okay. We can't hear you, Bella.
Yeah, unfortunately, airplane mode also turns off her Bluetooth, so she may need to just change it on to do not disturb, I think is a good one.
Yeah, hopefully she knows. Let me text her real quick.
While you're doing that, until she comes back, I just want to I've thrown out a ton of posts underneath supporting everything she says. And the whole George Soros behind the find that Latino media network is a very open and obvious thing that is going on. It was a massive, he didn't just pour a little bit of funds, he more or less orchestrated the entire thing to come together. And it openly in Politico, in Axios, in NPR, these are Democratic newspapers, they were even saying, yep, he's doing it to shut down, quote, misinformation, which I'm sure was not actually misinformation, but to shut down the voices. Just like we had talked in the past about how they assassinate people to shut down what they're saying. And then on these types of social media, they are stealing our voice to make us disappear. That is exactly what they were doing with the Latino media network.
Right. Let me, I want to, while we're waiting for her to come back, I noticed that she dropped, so she'll be back in a minute. If you guys will watch for her. I do want to cover a couple of these people that are in the Latino Media Network organization, because I find this fascinating. And I hope you guys understand what she's telling you is she went up against these people. It is truly astounding. One of the key points and takeaways, she did combat with the third largest union in the United States, a union so large that they orchestrated a literal circus in order to try to defeat them. And she won. They managed to convert the entire Miami-Dade school board over to conservative. And let me also tell you, one of the things that we've been fighting in the state of Florida is to make the school board elections partisan, meaning that you have to declare whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, because right now at the state level, that is not the case. So we tried to do an amendment to change that in the state of Florida in the last election, and it did not pass. So that is something that is definitely on the to-do list, because there are a lot of people that don't attend any of the election preparatory, so you don't understand where these people are coming from, and because they're considered a nonpartisan election, they don't have to declare what
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
I was on my soapbox. I gave you guys the greatest speech not connected to the internet right now.
So let me, yeah, you can't do the, Bridget said you can use do not disturb, but you cannot do the taking it
the
off.
Airplane mode. That makes sense. And then I'm sorry, but I'm not quite sure where I left off, but that last part that I said, I just feel it's so important, and I just want to make sure that I get an opportunity to finish it, Colonel, which is
sure, go ahead.
The degree of corruption that we've exposed here in Miami-Dade is a direct result of just a few of us. It's never felt like it's enough people, and it's taken just the slightest bit of opposition to bring this down. And I truly believe that the entire thing is a house of cards. The entire thing is a very unstable house of cards that comes tumbling down with the smallest bit of opposition. And how beneficial I feel like it is if there was one of the things that I feel that as a community we could benefit from working on together is that if you really think about local action and national impact as a pyramid, if you will, of a house of cards. Imagine a pyramid and a house of cards, and that our communities represent the base of that. What we did in Miami-Dade is not unique to us. This is something that anybody in anybody's community can do, and something that I really hope that when I share my testimony, I can inspire other people to do. If you approached exposing corruption within your own communities, within your own counties, all of us, all across the country, and you approach that with the same degree of passionate curiosity that you expose national politics, I think that you'd be surprised to how unstable the entire situation is and how much they rely on you being busy on the hamster wheel of work, your kids, dropping them off at practice, going home, making dinner, making sure that you're successful at your job. I think that what you'll find is that if you come across if you approached exposing corruption in your communities with that same degree of, making memes, doing digs with that same degree of really, truly passionate curiosity in your local communities, that's truly what local action, national impact means. We can expose corruption from the bottom up, and it's such an unstable house of cards that the smallest bit of opposition brings it tumbling down. All it takes is one person being curious in your community, and that person can be you, to really expose what they rely maintaining in the darkness in order to be successful in their operations.
So I've got to do this one more time to you. I'm just fascinated with the fact that you beat these people, and I'm looking at exactly who you defeated. Again, while you were gone, I did mention that you took on the third largest school district union in the country, to the point where they had to literally schedule a circus to try to distract you, and it didn't work. But this Latino media network, Bella, I don't know. This is a crazy wormhole here. Their last guy that they have on here is Luis Ubinas, Ubinas. This guy served as the president of the Ford Foundation from 2008 to 13. Now, I want to explain to everybody, again, if you're new, how important that is. The Ford Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation, the all of those, the Gates Foundation, we've heard of all of them. The foundations are used to fund the CIA efforts without the CIA having to have their fingerprints on them in many cases. Do they fund other things? Yes, but they are a go-between in many of these operations, because remember when I was telling you, a lot of the funding for the international union efforts came from foundations as well. So the Ford Foundation is the second largest foundation in the United States. And it's interesting that he was appointed in charge of that foundation in 2008, which means the people at Ford has this guy in the back pocket of Barack Obama, and he was going to be funding all of Barack Obama's bullshit, like creating ISIS and all that other shit overseas. This is the guy that was funding all of those initiatives. So you need to understand who he is. And oh, by the way, while he was the president of the Ford Foundation, he is also a senior partner at McKinsey, right? He was also appointed to be in charge of the Export-Import Bank, which is the one that cuts off countries that they're getting ready to overthrow to isolate them economically. The Export-Import Bank is the economic hitman for the United States. He also was on the International Trade Commission, which you know how important trade is because of the way President Trump has explained it with tariffs and stuff like that. This guy is one of the most influential people. He's the most influential on this board, but he, more importantly, probably than any of the things that I just said, and they're all bad, is he was on the board of the Pan America Development Foundation. Now, where did I hear about that? Oh, they're the ones that isolate every Latin America country in order to destroy it whenever the United States decides that they're going to declare war and install a dictator. That organization, that Pan America Foundation, is one of the primary instruments of statecraft power to destroy a country in Latin America. So this guy's an agent. He's embedded in this organization, and Bella kicked their ass. So go ahead, Bella.
No, I'm just kind of blown away because that wasn't even connections that I was aware of. You just get out there and you get into the fight. But I think it just speaks volumes to what I had said at the beginning of the phone call, which is that here I am thinking, well, I'm just a normal HR person that just is showing up to school board meetings. I'm only opposing this, and I just, I'm curious, so I do research, and then I use my platform to go out there and post about my research, and thinking how inconsequential I was to the bigger picture of it, and how it turned out to be quite the opposite. Like the smallest, I go back to the statement that I just said. The smallest bit of opposition can really bring the house of cards down, and I really hope that my testimony acts as a motivator and a way of encouraging other people to realize that it's like, if this can be done, I say it all the time and I'll say it again, if this can be done in Miami-Dade, out of all places, in a place where this kind of like deep-rooted corruption has existed for such a long time, in a place where didn't have anything that was there was nothing out of the way remarkable. We didn't have support from elected officials back then. As a result, now we've had people in our own community that have run for office, that are now in positions of that are making decisions that we are so proud to have helped and get to the roles that they're in right now, to be able to best represent our community. But I just hope that it really serves as that Miami-Dade can serve as a testimony and to encourage other people to become involved and see the difference that you can make when you're exposed, and to realize that, as Colonel's pointing out right now, I knew I was in a swamp. I knew that I was in the Latino swamp. I just, I guess that even I didn't realize to what degree, just how swampy it was.
It's very, very swampy. Okay. And so I'm going to have Bella back because we want to do a part 2 to this show, and we're going to talk about her personal experience on taking on some online aspects of this same fight that her and I discussed when we were originally talking. And I want her to walk you through the exposure. And basically, she has fought an online fight with some very familiar names that you guys will recognize. So we will hopefully, if she can carve out next Friday, same time, we will have her back. And we're going to go through something that is going to knock your socks off of her fight with an online personality and the revelations and how she went about doing it. And again, I'm just so blown away by her tenacity and her ability to fight this fight, both in the cyber area and literally on the ground. I just can't say enough. So we're going to go ahead. Bella, if you want to say any last words, and we're going to open it up for questions, and we will keep her. We don't go past 6, but we will keep you as long as you can stay with the audience asking questions, if that's works for you.
Yeah, no, that definitely works for me. I mean, parting words, just again, I gotta reiterate it because it's really my biggest goal and the thing that I value the most, which is that I do feel that God has put me in a position to be able to have, and I think that God gives our gift to the world is really our testimony, and I feel like God has put me in a position to share this with the hope and intention that it inspires other people to take an active role in the saving of their own communities, and seeing the picture of what it could mean if each one of us took accountability for preserving our own communities, what that would mean to the bigger picture of what our country would look like at the other end of that.
Couldn't agree more. Okay. So if you guys want to request a mic and come up and ask Bella any questions, Bridget, go ahead.
Oh my God. Bella, you absolutely are incredible. I mean, not just inspiring, but epically inspiring. And you really, just to put it in perspective, from a research standpoint, it is truly amazing what you have went up against. And when I talk about this whole thing being orchestrated, the Latino Media Network was run by Stephanie Valencia and Les Morales Roqueto, who worked on the presidential campaigns of Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. I mean, it's just it's like they touched every single part of that network and used it to weaponize against you. But you're right, it's a domino effect. And God sharpens us and creates us and forms us for this moment in time to use us as an epic weapon. And boy, he did with you. Congratulations. It is truly inspiring to have you on here. Thank you.
All right. If you guys want to ask Bella any questions, go ahead and raise your hand and request a mic. Ron, go ahead.
Sorry, Bella. Pleasure to make your acquaintance. Very awesome, awesome stuff that you talked about. You know, I kind of wanted to say something more kind of overarching about what you're talking about. You know, I think we as people in the United States, we view the president in terms of like dictator, or we look at the governor, or we look at the president, and we think that, hey, if we just elect this person, that everything is going to be fine. And what we really need to be doing is things like what you're doing. We need to be getting involved at the local level. Our entire system of government was designed to be from the bottom up, not the top down. And I feel like the mindset, we need to have good leaders up at the top, but those leaders at the top should inspire us at the bottom to be involved. That our form of government was designed to be where we, the people, are the people that are actually involved in the government. And, you know, I was really taken back when you talked about how 60% of the people who run unopposed. I thought that I was unaware of that number, and that kind of floored me a little bit. I have a very good friend. I have a podcast as well, and I have a very good friend who escaped Cuba at 9 years old. His parents were turned in by an uncle, and he had family that was executed by the Cuban army. So I would love to connect with you offline. And anyway, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I gave you a follow back, Ron. You know, to speak on that number, I think that's really important, because this is also something that I've had a lot of experience with, and something that I've had a lot of exposure in. I'm, you know, I don't do any kind of like public endorsement or whatnot, but I do find candidates that I feel align with my ideology, that are going to push forward, and I offer them support in any capacity that I can. And you know, to put the reality of a political campaign, because I think if you've never been involved in one, then you don't understand how powerful, how we can actually oppose the bad guys that are running in office, right? First and foremost, the first thing that I can tell you guys is that the bad guys, the rhinos, the Democrat, whoever it is, they're picked during primary elections. Your general elections are too late. By the time that you go vote in a general election, it's too late. They've already pushed out all of the good candidates that are running grassroots campaigns. And at this point, I'm almost hyper focusing on the corruption within our own party that exists, right? A lot of times we see that there's like these like giant rhinos that you wonder, like, how do they continue to get elected? And it's simple. They have a lot of money. And a grassroots candidate that's doing a true American that just says, I'm sick and tired of the corruption and I'm going to run against one of these people, doesn't stand a chance. They've got $1 million, PR firms that are going to attack them, are going to attack their family. A mailer campaign, anytime that you guys get a small mailer in the mail that says, hey, vote for me, those cost tens of thousands of dollars every time that you send one out. It costs money to pay somebody to come knock on your door. Anytime that you get a political campaign, a call on your phone, also tens of thousands of dollars that go into making those phone calls. They take a lot of money, and the reality is that we don't have the dark money to be able to oppose that very often. And a lot of these local candidates that are so brave to run, because that cannot be overstated, how brave you have to be to run for public office, no matter what role it is, it's the tax collector, school board, whatever it may be. It is a very brave thing to do, because immediately you become a target. And, the biggest support that you can offer these smaller campaigns is during primary election season, which, this is going to start at the end of 2025, early 2026. I strongly encourage everybody to identify a local candidate in your communities, a school board member, a commissioner, a tax collector, whatever it may be, a position, an elections, maybe even a supervisor of election, a position that you feel is significantly important, and donate your time, whether it's through research, knocking on doors, doing phone banks, however way it is that you can contribute your time, do it. Because like I said, 60% of positions do run unopposed, and very often is because the magnitude of opposing them alone feels very much like a Goliath. And you can change that by providing support through a community that supports these people through the several tens of thousands of dollars that they spend opposing these campaigns sometimes.
I agree with that. And, I have a little bit of a unique perspective on that. My father, when I was in like third grade, and my father ran for school board, and he was on the school board until my sister, who was 3 years behind me, graduated. So, and then he was also on the local hospital board, and my uncle was the mayor of my town. So I understand exactly what you're talking about. I mean, it was small. It was a small town, but still, that was the point of being active locally, and that's kind of where I learned to be active locally. Now, I've never run for office. I never really had that desire, but I do what I can to support my local people, and just kind of like what you talked about, and everything you said, I'll back up 1,000%. You're right on the money.
Do we have any other questions? Anybody else?
Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you, but I didn't see your hand up.
I'm so sorry. I don't know how to raise my hand. I was the person that claps.
Okay. Go ahead.
So I'm sorry. If you want me to back out, I can.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so my name is Chase. I've been messaging you, Colonel, for a while. I'm newly awakened, I guess you would call it. I live in Oakland, California. The mayor here was recalled recently, and there is a new grassroots effort. Well, they're calling it grassroots, but of course it's Oakland, so I don't believe that. But I'm hoping Bella maybe could give me some insight into this. There's a group here called Gotham Oakland, and it's run by a man named Seneca. I've been trying to talk to him online, and he doesn't seem to quite get it. He's also pushing for a new mayor to be elected here that was previously the police chief that was fired for investigating Mayor Sheng Tao's fraudulent campaign. So he didn't do anything before, and he didn't do anything after. And I don't know. So anyways, that's all disgusting and weird. So I'm hoping if there's any websites that Bella has that I could educate myself, because I don't know how to potentially run for office or even just get involved in any kind of local level. She keeps saying this thing that I've heard a lot recently. Local action means national impact. Is that a platform?
That's a slogan that General Flynn created.
I thought that was a Michael Flynn thing. So that's my first question. Maybe Bella could just message me about that.
Well, if you follow her, you'll be able to contact her. So
yeah, I followed you back, Chase, so that you can write to me. I've actually have I have a there's an account on here, Anthony Cavazas, Informed with Anthony, and he is very locally active in Southern California. Very passionate about not leaving California, protecting California at all costs, which I'm so inspired by, because I really believe California is our crown jewel of our country.
Big issue with Oakland, because a lot of that money coming into Oakland is coming from San Francisco, which is all from China. So there's a lot of Chinese money, which is...
I'm sure. I would also have you connect with Chad Vivas. on here as well. But if you write to me, these are two people that are passionate about research in California. Obviously, because I have such a local focus, I'm a good resource for anybody looking for information in Dade or in Florida in general, because of course my research takes me well into the state. But I'd love to put you in contact with, those two resources, which are two people that are going to be able to, that would be so interested in learning about, the research that you're doing and helping you in it and giving you resources if you were interested in running, just kind of like give you a guiding hand in that sense. So just shoot me a message after the podcast and I'll gladly, make that kind of connection between you.
So there's that. That was my first question. And then, are you familiar with Gilead and the Ryan White Fund? These are mega NGO insurance firms that are funding advertising online. They advertise on porn sites, but they also advertise everywhere on TV and everything else. They're specifically targeting children, and they target them through porn, through all these websites with these advertisements for COVID vaccines, hepatitis B vaccines, all these HPV. Most of them they don't need, because most of them aren't even sexually active because they're children. And then second of all, I think that ties into Gladio because I think it's a massive money laundering scheme. I made a video recently and I'm trying to put it into a Substack. You can go on Grindr, which is a site for gay hookups. You can make a profile. You can say that you're like a 500-pound trans woman. You will get inundated with advertisements for hormones and for pills and everything. If you go to these websites and you fill it out, they'll ask you, like, do you have liver failure? Do you have kidney failure? You can say yes to all of that. They still send you these pills. They don't ask for social security. They don't ask for ID. And I'm of the opinion that's where children are getting these hormones. I think that they're getting hormones online. I don't think that their parents are taking them.
Chase, we're trying to stick to the subject that...
Sorry, yeah, I'm taking you off.
Yeah, let's stay on topic. We've got some other hands up. Thanks for coming up.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll back out.
Okay.
Thank you so
Tim, go ahead. Tim? I'm not sure Tim can hear us, or Bridget, you go ahead and then we'll come back to Tim.
Bella, what was the first thing that sparked you to take on this battle? Specifically, what was your trigger that it's like, I've got to go? And how did you seek out other people to organize?
Yeah, so thank you for asking that, because it kind of gives me an opportunity. So I think I had 2 points where I decided to get involved. The first one was when I joined the digital battlefield, when I started my original page of Red Pill Babe. I used to go by Red Pill Babe. Now I go by BelleLiberTea. I kind of had to do the moment that once I was, locally involved, obviously I was doxxed, and, remaining anonymous was no longer an option for me. So, the first moment was really the realization that I'm a former Democrat. And, I've, like many other people within my age group, you're young and you think that Democrats are the party that cares and that's looking out for the interest of normal people. And I had very much bought into that propaganda. And then I had I had my moment of realization. I had a friend of mine in particular. I remember he had asked me about Donald Trump, and I was like, I was already a conspiracy theorist of sorts. So I wouldn't just say that I was like a Democrat at that point. I was a Barack Obama Democrat, and in 2012 had become pretty just disillusioned with the government in a sense. I had gone into politics thinking that Barack Obama was going to get us out of the wars. I'm a 9/11 baby. I saw 9/11, when I was a child, and that was very impactful to me. It's one of those like moments that like change everything for you. And in 2012, it was just very clear to me that neither party really had the better interest of the American people. So I had become very disillusioned with government. And I remember a friend of mine asking me my opinion on Donald Trump, and I was just like, oh, come on, it's a joke. The guy's a reality TV guy. This is what America has become. And I remember his response to me was just like, you're way too smart to think that. And, that comment alone was just enough for me to go out there and start challenging things that maybe I had notions that I had about Donald Trump at that time. And sure enough, like happened to so many of us, you go out there and you start research and you start realizing the magnitude of the lies that have been fed to you and how susceptible you've been to all of it. And that very much felt like it almost put me into a panic mode where I felt that at that moment, it's like, I've been so wrong. I need to course correct and I need to help other people correct that, right? So then that inspired me to start my page, and Red Pill Babe turned into one of the largest truther pages, if you will, on Instagram before it was deplatformed. There was one of the top 3 largest accounts. I want to take the opportunity to say that I start posting online, and that's a very weird transition that I'm sure a lot of you can relate to. I had a job and a life, and I had to justify spending copious amounts of time on the internet posting memes and feel like, is this worth it? Am I being productive? Like it kind of, I really had to question if I was doing the right thing. And it's really important for me to share that one of the things that was very active as a part of that early awakening process for me when I first started posting and got involved there was very much that I felt like I got the opportunity to talk about Jesus Christ every day. And, when this was at the beginning, when people were talking about Pizzagate a lot, and then that was kind of like dominating the conversation, child trafficking and these horrors, these truly horrible things. And I felt like almost daily the question of, how do you sleep? Like, oh my God, this is like traumatic, like researching these things and knowing these things. And, it gave me an opportunity almost daily. And I think that God made sure that opportunity was presented to me daily as a reminder that I was on the right track, was that I got to speak to the testimony of like, I can do it, because knowing that kind of evil exists confirms without a reasonable doubt that the only way to battle something that evil is the power of Christ. And it gave me an opportunity to talk about my faith on a daily basis. And I felt that God presented that opportunity to talk about it as a daily confirmation for me that despite in what felt like the physical plane here in this world, it felt like a quote unquote waste of time being on the internet all day. It truly wasn't. And that was kind of like my first awakening. And then my second awakening, very important, was January 20th, 2021. Joe Biden had just been inaugurated, and my father, who had my grandmother was a political prisoner for 9 years. She was caught smuggling guns to the rebels in the mountains to fight against Fidel Castro. She spent 9 years in prison when my dad was just a child. My grandfather, also a rebel, that was a member of a rebel group, Alpha 66, also was assassinated as a result of being a leader amongst this Alpha 66 group. My family was very much affected of that. My father, clearly having been left an orphan for most of his childhood as a result of the fight against a communist regime, called me on January 20th when Joe Biden was inaugurated as what I would imagine was a trigger of his own trauma. And he was very concerned about the page and what decision I was going to take as far as being involved in politics. And, the fear that day was to call his only daughter and tell her, I'm worried and I want you to take a step back. And my response to him was, I'm my grandmother's daughter, and I'm not going to take a step back. In fact, I'm going to double down. And I'm going to ensure that I protect the country that you brought me into to run away from the evil, the true evil that is communism that robbed you of yours. I'm very well aware, because my family had to exile to the United States, that if America fails, the world fails, and that there's nowhere to exile to if America fails. And that reality is what drove me to get off my ass and become involved in the local process, because I knew I had to be an active participant in preserving the republic that my family fought to bring me into.
Amen.
Wow. Just wow.
Yeah, now you know why I had to have her on here. Tim, I see you're back up here. Did you have a question for Bella?
Yes, Carol. Hey, Bella. You mentioned your first meeting with the school board push had over 100 members, and I was going to ask you what vehicle you used to do that, and in response, I heard you had a web presence. So how did you focus your web presence specifically to Miami? and that area?
So that's a good question. I think that originally, from the moment that I had my page, despite it being news that was being covered, a lot of the stuff that many people were talking about at that time, one of the things that made my perspective, I always had, Miami people have a certain flavor. There's a certain delivery. There's a certain accent that we have. I'm sure that you're hearing my very exotic accent now. Vernacular that we use. And as a result, that kind of made my page a little more Miami focused. However, I had already taken during COVID, because I was fighting local government. I had, I started posting more about my local community. And as a result of posting more about my local community, more people within my own community found me. Now, I was very fortunate here in Miami-Dade because it wasn't just myself with with a large platform. I have a co-host on my podcast, because I also have a podcast called Mostly Peaceful Latinas. And my co-host on that podcast, Linda Cuadros, also has a presence, also has a large presence on social media. And when both of us started talking about local politics, it kind of just naturally occurred. As a result of me covering local politics, local people started coming to my page. And, I will say I had somewhat of a benefit at that time because, early January 2021, people were very anxious. They were they were trying to, we had just experienced what we had experienced in November 2020. The inauguration had just happened. Lockdowns were still going on. People were still masked up. They were still pushing this COVID narrative. And I think that by just pure, just the fact that it had gotten so bad made a lot of people more desperate, and then therefore more curious in getting involved. And I think that, that's something that I hope that I can attest to, is that we shouldn't wait until it gets that bad again to want to get involved. We should see this moment that we have right now, particularly within the next 4 years, as an opportunity to really drive, to be even more involved, more active, more aware than we were during COVID, and make the most of this monumental moment that we are having in American history to be an active participant in taking back our country.
Great question.
Thank you. That was a great answer. You're a really good speaker.
Thank you.
Yes, she is. Bridget, go ahead.
Now, Bella, do you see yourself as advancing into more than just the local politics? Or do you see yourself staying as more of the coordinator of trying to get people enthusiastic and motivated into getting involved?
I love that question. I get asked often if I feel like I'm going to run for public office, and the answer almost exclusively is no. Maybe at some point later on, I'll feel called to that. But right now, I feel like there's not a lot of voices out there with my message. There's not a lot of people there. I feel like I'm at very much like the awakening felt when I was trying to wake people up from my anonymous page and try to get people the reality of it. It feels like, you got to a location before you're early to location, and you're calling in everybody else, telling them like, hey, when are you going to get here? When are you going to get here? When are you going to get here? Right. And the awakening felt like that for me. And then now I feel like this testimony of just the power of local activism and involvement, because digital activism is very real. So it doesn't just mean boots on the ground, despite that being a very important aspect. It also means just the hyper focus of caring about exposing corruption in your community. I feel like I'm at the forefront of that right now, and I don't feel that enough people are talking about it. And I feel that until it catches on, until I see and I mean, it's something that I will say from testimony. It's obviously growing. We're seeing it all over the country. All you had to do was look at groups like Moms for Liberty and what we saw during COVID and these revolutions that were happening in school boards all over our country. I think is the result of more people becoming involved and becoming aware of like, hey, if I want to fix this, I have to become an active part in it. So I, to that point, I really, what I see for myself is I want to continue to be a voice. I want to be able to continue to share my testimony to inspire more people to become involved. And I'd like to continue because I truly feel very passionate about my I want to call it, I don't know if it's a hypothesis or what it is at this point. I feel like I've proved that it's real. Local action works. And despite me wanting to continue to be a focus in my community, I hope that I can be, be in a position and continue to be in a position where my personal testimony of the changes that we've done in our community can continue to be an inspiration to get other people to become involved at that local level capacity. I do, I want to take a moment to boast. I know that I've talked to you guys a little bit about the wins, but you can't imagine. Miami-Dade flipped historically red for the first time since 1988. It had been a blue county. And for the first time in history, we flipped into a bright red majority. We had every single county office that was running, tax collector, supervisor of election, sheriff, that Miami-Dade had not had a sheriff since 1967. For the first time, our property appraiser, our clerk of courts, all our county positions were won by conservative Republicans. Our senators won conservative Republicans. Our state representatives won conservative Republicans. We took it all home. A county that has been notorious for being blue, a county that it still has more Democrats registered than Republicans, something that I hope that I'll be able to change next year, a la Scott Spretzler. We did that here in Miami-Dade. We have the largest conservative school board body, a conservative Republican representation in Congress, in the Senate, in the Florida House, in the Florida Senate. And I just really think that it's all a testimony of what happens when you end up pushing back about the narrative. And I share that not to boast, even though I'm very proud of those accomplishments, but because if we can do that here in Miami-Dade, I really feel that it can be done anywhere else in the country.
And I'm going to say this one more time. Bella did this in an area that has an astronomical number of covert entities swarming around her. She did that literally standing on an island surrounded by alligators. There's probably not, other than maybe DC, the Miami CIA station has always been the largest one in the entire United States. So most people go, oh, hey, I didn't even know they had a station in the United States. They have, and it has always been the largest one in Miami. So she has done this with probably in large part unbeknownst to her, although she saw the top surface alligators in the labor unions and the PR firms. What she probably didn't realize is their interconnectivity to the bigger picture, which just going through a few of those bios in that one organization that was behind the scenes fighting against her, she did that and she took all of them on and won in big ways.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I want to take an opportunity to be like, I've been so fortunate, to have a community of people and organizations that have that here in Miami-Dade that have come together. Building community is so important. It cannot be overstated. And so often I think that just the way that life is set up these days, you are somewhat isolated from your neighbors. We don't live in an America where people necessarily know who's on their block. And a huge factor in the success that we've had here in Miami-Dade has been in building community, something that the operatives very much tried to attack. I mean, I can explain to you guys the interpersonal dynamics, how much that was targeted and how much that was the way that they used to weaken us, was by keeping us or getting us to fight and creating discord amongst one another. And I can't overstate how it was their primary form of attack against our efforts was attacking the interpersonal relationships in the community that we were creating. And I say that to add emphasis that building your community like I said, when you start posting about local politics, more people locally in your community, you're going to find other fighters amongst you. I promise you, there's people in your communities that probably care. They just don't know, they haven't found other people. So, groups like the Citizens Defending Freedom, groups like the Christian Family Coalition, Moms for Liberty, the Election Integrity Brigade, the Defend Florida, groups that have still have all to some degree come together to be able to build a community and share this purpose in protecting this our little corner, right? It's if America's one giant slice of pizza, you gotta worry about our little slice, and how to protect that.
Awesome. Anybody else have any questions for Bella?
Can I ask one more?
Sure.
No, I'm sorry. I'm just
No,
fascinated.
I know.
Bella, how long have you been involved with this? I mean, how long, and how has your family received this since you doubled down?
Great question. I opened up the Red Pill Babe page in 2018. 2018 was kind of like my big moment, and then of course I became highly involved. And I had already been talking about local government during COVID in 2020, but I didn't really become an activist until 2021. So I hope that goes more into the testimony of, we're talking about a very short time span. We're not talking about a long time. We're not talking about me having any kind of formal background or training to go up against this machine. I just had the desire and curiosity and the tenacity to do it, despite I can't tell you the attacks. I've been targeted every day of my life for the last 3 years. My family, my job, my reputation, my image. I mean, it hasn't been a walk in the park, and nonetheless, the reward has definitely been worth it. But that was kind of that's how long I've been involved in the efforts, and I hope that, like I said, serves as testimony that it really doesn't. It's a very unstable house of cards that comes down with the slightest bit of opposition. I don't know if there was a second part of the question that I missed. Sorry.
No, was there? How's your family? How is your family?
Oh, my family. Yes. So that was actually I started my page in 2018. I also got married in 2018, and that was a change. That was a testing moment, I would say, speaking in full transparency to all of you guys, because I think that to some degree, a lot of people who have become involved in this have had it affect their personal life, whether it's, friends that think you've lost your mind and cut you out, or family members that think you've lost it or whatnot. And there was definitely a moment where it was new, and it was a hard transition, I would say, initially, for my husband to understand what had taken place. But I can say, the grace of God has been great, and as a result, my husband has seen the efforts, he's seen the attacks against me, he's seen the accomplishments, and like most things that throughout our relationship that he's seen me accomplish, I've kind of always been a person that says, hey, I've got this new endeavor, and now I'm going to make it my entire personality, and I'm going to accomplish it, and somehow I'm crazy enough to get it done. At the beginning, he might have thought I had lost my mind for a bit there, but then the results started coming in, and he saw, and just like many times he had seen before, he's like, she did it again. She's a psychopath, and somehow she manages to do it every single time. And as a result, he's proud of my work. He talks about it every opportunity that he has. So I think at the beginning, there was definitely a toll that it took on my marriage in the initial transition of who is this new person? Where her entire personality is now this, because you got to imagine, it wasn't just that I was talking about these things or waking up. I'm also getting actively attacked. Our family's getting actively attacked. I lost my job. My job was attacked, and I lost my job as a result of this. So it had real life consequences that affected my household. So logically, there's a moment of is this all worth it? Which is why I go back to what the question that you asked earlier about what inspired me. And it was kind of like that consistent confirmation from Christ, I feel, that has been so present throughout this entire journey, finding a way to give me confirmation that you're on the right track. And now it's just, he loves it. He tells people all the time, oh, look at my wife with Donald Trump, or like, look at my wife is Red Pill Babe, or whatever it may be. And it's great. And I think that it's just, a testimony that when you're walking on the right path, things find a way, even if things have to fall apart a little bit to then come back together. God finds a way of providing the environment that you need to continue to fight on this fight when you're in it for the right reasons, I feel.
So, Bella, the audience here that's been with me this entire time, what you just said, and I know you're not part of that on a normal basis, coalesces exactly with why we're all here. Because when I first started researching this and started posting on True Social, which of course is how I came across you, the correlation of what I was learning to my life, where I was stationed at, things that I had done, places that I had deployed to, it was clear to me almost immediately that the fact that I had been a teacher for 4 years inside the military and had the skills to organize things and communicate them and speak in public, it just, if I looked back on my life and I would say, if you were going to have someone expose something like Operation Gladio, what would you have their life consist of in order to prepare them to be where they are today? I would venture to say there's probably nothing left out. No, there was probably nothing left out of my life that God didn't put me in places that didn't lend itself to where I'm at today. And so I just find it fascinating that it does also take a humility to recognize this isn't about you and I. This is about God and doing what he has put in front of us to do, and understanding that that is a mission. And that does take a huge amount. Hold on a second. Stop it. That my puppy just came in here. It does take a certain, a lot of humility to not fill yourself with that and give the glory to God. And so I just want to recognize that all of us in here recognize what you just did. And it is huge, but it is also how we go forward with the momentum, because as soon as you get off that, it will come tumbling down. We are here for his glory and we are here for his mission. And we all have our individual talents, because despite, if you taught a class saying what you had accomplished, not everyone has the skills, especially you're very, very, as people have noted, articulate in being able to convey information. And that is a skill. People can learn it, but there's not a lot of people that comes natural to. And so there are going to be people obviously in here that, and just if you look at the group of people that we have, that basically illustrates how it takes a team. And you are very gracious to acknowledge that there were people working around you that supported you. You were able to afford yourself audiences that had already been built. But you have such an incredibly amazing story. And that's the reason why, I've followed you for years now. We've corresponded, but it wasn't until recently that it dawned on me that you lived through one of these operations, and I had to have you on here so that you could share your story. And when I first reached out to Bella, I had no idea that her story the whole time. I have my notes here for all of you guys watching on Rumble. I just started writing down. She's telling me this story, and I just started writing bullet points down. I'm like, oh my God, labor unions, PR, ambassador. So before we go, we do have a few minutes. I want to, because I do have a note here that we've not covered for the first show. And that was the statistics that you laid out for, you did mention the the January 6th roundup. Tell everybody how many of those people were from the state of Florida.
Yeah, about half, a little bit over half at this point, I believe. When you look at the final numbers, close to, I want to say a little bit more than half, under 60% of the individuals that have been identified are Floridians, and it's something that a weight that I carry with me that I think it's so important to bring attention to. It breaks my heart that we have yet been able to establish recognition from some kind of elected official that recognizes that, the persecution of patriots for January 6th hasn't been it hasn't been a by chance. It hasn't been based off severity of, quote unquote crime. It's truly been, they've used these tipsters, these third parties, in particular sedition hunters, something that I hope at some point will be addressed by Elon, on how this app in particular has lent itself to the persecution of Americans by allowing groups, very well-funded groups like sedition hunters and Antifa pages like the one that, that target me and my local community, how they have weaponized this platform to use it as a way of bypassing per se persecution from the federal agencies. You don't, the FBI doesn't have to come after you. Sedition hunters will, and then the FBI will use sedition hunters to target you. And like I said, I'll be honest with you, I don't think it's a coincidence that Floridians have been targeted. I've got a pulse on this. Lucky enough to have been, build relationships with other activists all over the country that you just exchange war stories with, like what's going on in your community, what's not. And one of the things that I find is that Florida is one of the most activated states in the union. And I say that because, with all due respect, and Colonel knows that I have a little bit of history with the Ron DeSantis thing, when he went up against Trump. I still have a lot of respect for our governor, and I think that he is an excellent governor. But I will say this, I think that there is a lot of wins that Florida have had that have been a result of Ron DeSantis listening to a group of people that have been very loud. I think that the reason why Florida is free is not necessarily because of Ron DeSantis, but because the people of Florida have demanded that she be free. And as a result, Ron DeSantis has heard our cries, and what he's done to be a responsive politician is that he's kept his ear to the ground to the activism. But I do believe that Floridians have been disproportionately targeted by these federal agencies in regards to January 6th, because Florida has a more activated populace when it comes to activism. And again, it's something that I hope that, with time, particularly in the next 4 years, that it's something that it is addressed, which is the disproportionate number of Floridians that have been targeted by the January 6 agencies, that when the investigations begin on the persecution of Americans through these agencies using January 6 as the reason for that the investigations don't stop at the agencies, but at these entities like these Antifa pages or these, sedition hunters, these quote unquote tipsters, that the investigations extend on to these individuals as well, and that we expose not just the federal agents and agencies, but also the informants and operators that they had working for them on this app in particular. To how it was weaponized, how these individuals and these entities were weaponized against Americans, and have that be part of, a justice that's served. I think that one of the, I've told you guys a few times already about my grandparents' history. And I grew up, growing up in a household where the worst thing that you could be was a communist. And if you were a Democrat, you were a communist. And, I grew up daily hearing about, and your grandmother, and she was a political prisoner, and screw you communism, blah, blah, blah. And every single day, your grandma was a political prisoner, your grandmother was a political prisoner. And I can tell you that one of the things that makes me the saddest about what we've experienced over the last 4 years has been the awareness that we have Americans in DC gulags. over January 6th, that we in fact do have political prisoners in America, and that as a first generation American daughter of immigrants that came to this country truly believing in the American dream, there's nothing that breaks my heart like knowing that that's a reality.
And how many of them in your research are veterans?
Over 30% of them.
So for the audience, what you are witnessing is the Phoenix program, which is you have your fellow countrymen informing the government on who to come pick up. And you target the people that will be the most effective in thwarting government control. As Bella points out, a large majority of those people are in the state of Florida. And it was done in many ways, not just to attack Governor DeSantis, but also President Trump, who, of course, we know moved down here. And then you go after veterans. And when you demoralize, the whole purpose of this effort was to demoralize people, to keep them off the streets and off of the advocacy of the good guys. That's what they do. They target you and they try to beat you up, as they did Bella, not physically, but psychologically. And that is supposed to diminish the amount of effort they will make, or that the people watching them will make, because they don't want to go through what those other people did. And I think it's incredibly important, as Bella pointed out, that people understand this has been done all over the world. It has been done by our country and others all over the world, and who's behind it. Because she's right. I want to make unequivocally clear that all of the communications that occurred in order to rat these people out or identify them, because what she's saying is that all of those pictures were not ran through a photo identification database and identified. Those photos went out, and it was people in their local neighborhoods who were paid by sedition hunters to give information and basically rat their neighbors out. We had sedition hunters here in my hometown looking for 3 of those people. I'm very familiar with how it works. And it's disgusting that people would do that. But what I want everybody to understand is our government knows who did that. Our government has all of the communications. That is what they do. None of this was done outside of their purview. So the information will be there for the people that are coming in. And that's why over the next month or so, we're going to have to be extra vigilant about what's going on and communicating with each other to understand, because they don't want anybody seeing what they did. And as soon as the good guys get in there, they'll be able to see it all, because none of this stuff was outside of the purview of the people who track all of this information. And that includes everything at Twitter. We have one last speaker, and then we're going to close out. We've met the magic 6 o'clock. So all rights reserved. We're going to let you ask the last question. We're going to give Bella a chance to say her closing comments, and then hopefully we'll have her back next Friday. Go ahead.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you guys covering this in such detail with firsthand accounts. And something I wanted to bring up, because Colonel Towner, I think it was one of your spaces that I found out the parliamentarians from Hawaii derailed Ron Paul's delegation. Do you remember that?
I do not. That doesn't mean you didn't hear it here, but we've covered so much.
I'm pretty sure it was.
Okay.
But long story short, we got into communications in the DMs and ended up just finding out so much stuff between the dirt bags in Hawaii and what they're doing. And the reason I want a microphone now is to talk to Bella about the connection with Florida and Hawaii. Our state chair, Tamara Mackay, had her horse poisoned, and she's been like gang stalked and threatened and harassed. and all this stuff. And we found out that the people that are doing this online, they're not even in Hawaii. They're in Florida, and there's a law firm that has been protecting this one agency. It's called Hyra News. It's like this fake rage bait conservative news agencies, but people, we're in the 5th generation warfare. People have a really hard time distinguishing truth from false. So they catch some stuff on Facebook. You have people that aren't tech savvy. You have people that weren't battling it out on Twitter Spaces 2 years ago, and they're just really susceptible to being manipulated. But all this stuff, there's some seed groups in Hawaii, and what they're doing is they're paying people from Florida to harass people here. And I had somebody else who just same thing. She ran for district chair, got elected, and had like some fake Mormon Jehovah's Witnesses at her doorstep the next day. And it's all the accounts that were covering what happened during the Maui fires are the ones that are having people like knocking on their doors and car windows, and tires slashed and lug nuts pulled off of car tires. And it's the good people in the Hawaii Republican Party are just getting demolished right now. Like we just had these provocateurs, and like you said, it's not the black mask Antifa people. It's very polished people that are in board meetings from a homeowners association that's conducting the parliamentarian procedure in your local GOP. And I'm sorry to say, but conservatives are not equipped to deal with that level. They think every Antifa or the enemy is Democrats with purple hair, and that's not the case. And I figured I pieced all this together, but it was nice to hear what you had to say. And I actually, about halfway through this space, I called somebody who ran for Senate district rep, and we were discussing what happened because he's a veteran. He's former like Army Special Forces or something, and he couldn't figure out what was going on. I'm like, look, dude, this is an op, bro. Don't underestimate them just because they're goofy old ladies or knuckleheads posting online. They just kneecapped our entire delegation. They've crippled our political party. And you guys still think it's some sort of fucking joke, like online harassment and trolling. This is organized. And it comes out of these, Leadership Institute, and a lot of these conservative think tanks.
Yes.
Are the seeds of it.
Can you tell me the name of the law firm again?
I would have to send out a message, or let me check my DMs.
Yeah,
I'd be interested in getting that information.
Yes.
So when you have it, just like the name of the firm and also the name of the harassment group, like
yes.
I'd just be curious to see if there's any kind of connections. And Colonel, what a great note to end on. I've got 2 goals over the next year, right? Because we've had great accomplishments. We gotta do more. So number 1 is out registering Democrats in Miami-Dade. Miami-Dade did turn historically red. However, we still have more registered Democrats than Republicans. So I hope to do my goal, and I say register Republicans, I register anybody because I'm I work for a 501c3 that just wants to get people involved in the process. However, one of the things that I do focus on is that I go to where the low-hanging fruit is. Where are the voters that I know share my morals, my convictions? Where are they? And they are in the church. They are in the church. The American church needs to stand up. The American church needs to become an active participant in taking our country back. The only force that we have that can go against the numbers that the union is able to mobilize is the church. That's the first place that we have to go. So goal number 1 that I have for Miami-Dade is to have not take my foot off the accelerator next year, continue to have voter registrations within the churches, preferably 2 churches every single month, and see what we can do about changing those numbers in Miami-Dade. Number 2 goal that I have that goes to the point, and I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure who was just speaking because it didn't give me the speaker, but I hope to learn afterwards. But the second biggest goal that I do have that I think it's so important to the point that you just made, which is we need to hold our party accountable. And that is done through your local GOP, through your local Republican Executive Committee. If you are not a committee man, if you are not a committee woman involved in your local Republican Party, you do not get to complain about what it is that they're doing or not doing with the money that is supposed to be funding conservative candidates in your area. one of the places where we have the most power and where the power is the hardest to break through, believe it or not, is within our own party. And I really hope within this next year and the next 2 years is to truly spend time not just exposing corruption within our own party, but more importantly, expressing to people from within my community how important it is that they be involved as committee men and committee members, and that they're paying attention to what the local GOP is doing, who is representing the local GOP, who is funding the local GOP. And I'm saying this under the expectation that a lot of your listeners are probably Republican, but I also gotta make this mention, even on the off chance that I have a Democrat listener here right now. They are doing this in both parties. During primary elections, what they do is that they cut out any kind of organic grassroots support in order to continue to reinforce the established order that they have. And the only way to fight that is to be involved. I have seen, I attended an event a couple of years ago, and they had a panel, and there were people that had run for local office, and they had the party representation for Democrats, Republicans, Independents. There was quite a number of representation, but what really was really outstanding about the testimony that they were sharing was that Republicans and Democrats alike, grassroots candidates that were trying to run campaigns to change how their party looked, were running for local office and were seeing sabotage coming from within their own party. The main aggressors were not the opposing party. It was coming from within their own party, Democrats and Republicans alike. And the only way that you oppose that is by becoming an active participant in that, either by yourself or by supporting somebody that's an active participant in it, because they're up against that. They're up against dark money. They're up against, establishment figures that have been in office for lifetimes. And the only way to really oppose it is if there is a true awareness that takes place with the American psyche, that becoming involved in politics and local politics, attending an executive committee for your Republican or your Democrat party, whatever it may be, is not something that's an option anymore. It should be a requirement in order for us to be able to have any true significant change of saving our country, is to really play an active part, because we need to be able to call out the corruption within our own party. Democrats don't need to vote with us. Republicans don't need to vote with Democrats. And I'm trying to speak openly about both parties, because I think that the issue truly comes in how it is that grassroots efforts, whatever side of the party they come from, grassroots efforts are toppled over by these much more powerful establishment type of operations. So, I strongly encourage everybody to become involved. One of my biggest goals here in Florida is to change the way that the local Miami-Dade GOP currently represents us.
Thank you. Thank you, Bella. And thank you, everybody, for being here. And I will confirm with her to have her back here to go through her very interesting online, very similar story. And again, just as a teaser, it's going to knock your socks off. So hopefully we'll do that next Friday at the same time, same place. And again, thank you all for being here. And thank you again, Bella, for blessing us with your presence here.
Thank you for having me, Colonel. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks. Take care, everybody. Have a nice weekend. We'll see you back at Monday at 4:00.
Have an amazing.
Whoa.
Hello?
Hey, just got off the show. What's going on?
Oh, good. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I thought it was a little earlier, and I thought about it after I called you, and I was like, wait, I would have called her like right in the middle of it anyway. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I don't
Um,
expect everybody else to remember my schedule.
Well,
I
I
just-
remember you said it was like from 2 to 5 or something.
No, it's 4 to 6 every day,
4
Monday
to
through
6.
Friday.
Okay.
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
It's fine.
So the party was fun. I just realized like why I'm so glad I don't drink. Because I sat in between so the girl that worked with the podcast, her name's Annie, and she's super sweet. I really enjoy her.
for the major thing that you would use it for, that's probably fine. But yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. That was really cool. They had some really cool stuff. Like one girl got like an espresso machine. Somebody else got a cooking, like a fire pit thing.
What?
Yeah, they bought some stuff. It was kind of crazy.
That is crazy.
Yeah, the restaurant we went to was called Carve, like you're carving a pumpkin. And so don't remember, at least. I'm trying to think, because I think at Lakeland Regional, we may have done like a Christmas party one year. But other than that, like, I don't remember having worked for any employer that has ever done, like, they do retreats and stuff. Like once a year. I think I just missed it. I think they just did theirs in October, but I was just like, I was looking at the menu when they kind of sent the email out stating that the date and the time and like what was going to happen. So we had our last patient at noon, and then we were all meet there between noon and 3, do the gift thing, then eat or whatever. And they're going to put our time in. So we're going to get paid for like the full day, even though we left at noon. So, which was nice. Yeah, so I was just like, I went to the girl at the front desk. She's the practice manager for the other physician that works in the office who does it's urogynecology. So they do like a lot of like vaginal surgeries and stuff like that. And so I went to her this morning and I was like, so I've never done this before. Like, how does this work? Because even the Christmas party that I went to for Lakeland Regional, we had to pay for our own food. And she was like, no, you get like a menu. Like they have picked out like what food we can choose from like their menu, and everything's paid for by the practices. And because I looked at their menu and some of them were like $25 and $30 for like the meal. And I was like, I guess I'm just going to have water and a salad because I'm not paying $30 for anything. But yeah, the 10-ounce New York strip was one of the options. It was really good. Then I felt really stupid. So I called you and asked you about how to ask them to cook it. And so I made my choice. And then I was like, feeling very adult because I knew what I wanted. And I was like, because I figured the next question would have been like, how do you want it cooked? And so I said, and I would like mine medium rare. And he goes, we cook them medium. And I go, sure, okay. I don't know what that means and how that's different than medium rare, but okay. But it was very good. Murray got a couple pieces. I ate most of it, but there was about a little strip. He had maybe 5 or 6 little pieces, but it was good.
Cool.
Yeah. It was fun.
It sounds awesome. Sounds like a great company.
Yeah. I went up to Dr. Shaw. He's such a nice guy. Like this morning, Fridays are like his vasectomy days. And I had gone to the back to put like when patients check out, we have like a checkout sheet that the physicians mark on to say like their follow-up stuff and all of that. I went to go take some back to put in their little folder, and I initiated, was like, good morning, Dr. Shaw. And he was like, hey, how are you? And just very nice. And when Annie and I were leaving, we both went up to him, to thank him for the meal, for everything. And he shook my hand and goes, welcome to the family. And I was just like, thanks. He's very, very nice guy. So,
cool.
Yeah, I wanted to get my manager something, but I don't really know like what to get. I got Annie something, not anything crazy. And the other front desk, she's like the lead. She's been there a couple years. Those very nice people. So I got them just little cheapy, Christmas things. But I wanted to get something for Teresa, the manager. I just don't really know what to get a manager, So.
Yeah. I mean, a candle, something like that's always a good thing.
Yeah. I was like, I could get her a card, but cards are, people read them and throw them away. I wanted to get her something that she could use or at least would stay around for a little bit.
Yeah, that's why I think the candle's a good idea, especially if it's in, a decorative kind of a,
Yeah.
Like Yankee Candle or whatever, something like that.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Let me call you right back.
Okay.
All right. Bye.
All right. Bye.
Hello?
Colonel Towner?
Yes.
And Stellar, I think your Rumble channel's still open. I've had two
Oh.
people call me
Oh my
saying that it hasn't been
gosh.
turned off, and I hear you talking about doctors.
I wasn't talking about doctors. I was talking about my daughter. I did leave it on.
Oh,
I am
okay.
so
That's
sorry.
not
I was talking to my
really-
daughter. That's so funny.
Yeah, they're like, I think she's talking doctors. We don't want her to get in trouble. It must be private. And I'm like, I'll call her on here.
Oh, I didn't even know you could call on X. Hey, everybody.
Yeah,
I'm talking to
X.
Stellar.
Yeah, call if we're friends.
All right. Thanks. That is